had a quick question if I could ask one.
Sure, what's up?
So I know with some of these conferences, they usually ask for like a poster ab or an abstract.
Sure.
Um, and usually the abstract it's just like an essay, not an essay, but I've done an abstract before. How would an abstract look for like a case presentation?
Great question. And so my recommendation for that is to actually see what's been done before for each conference. So everybody's going to have different preferences. Usually what I do is an introduction, kind of like including the course of treatment, what we did, what was unique about it, what is some of the history on this type of condition. And then you can start discussing, like with your methods, you can basically say, what is it that was accomplished? Like, what was the groundbreaking effect that this treatment had on the patient? And then you can make some conclusions about what you would do different in the future or how this could change the current literature. Because a lot of these case presentations, like say it's a rare syndrome, this might be one of 30 different people in the United States that have that syndrome, but there's not enough data to actually make a concrete recommendation. And so your job is to portray what kind of pitfalls did you see whenever you're treating this patient? What kind of other ancillary effects did this treatment have on the patient? What would you consider doing differently? So a lot of it doesn't have to be concrete, like this is a perfect protocol to treat this patient. It could be, this is what I would do looking forward. Let's see what other people say. And so I can help you out with that individually if you'd like, and we can go through it. Honestly, one of the things that I've done with students is I'll send them abstracts that I've made before just so they can fashion their own after it. And it makes it a lot easier because you can just see what's been done and just be like, hey, if it worked before, then let me model this and put it in my own words with my own case. And then here we go. Because everybody gets really overwhelmed by the poster presentations. But for the poster presentations, honestly, once you just know the format, all you got to do is chart check the patient essentially, and you can fill it all out as long as you can write a succinct history, find all the information for the background, and then write your conclusions in an aesthetically pleasing way. That's all a poster presentation really is. You don't have to have any like high level of statistician knowledge or anything like that, honestly, unless you're doing like huge, crazy retrospective database analyses, which again, that's also an option. But if you're doing a case presentation, you would not need that. So all you need for a case presentation really is a case, a place to present it, the patient's permission, and then either a mentor or an attending or somebody to help you look over it. That's pretty much it. Like those are your four things. And if you have those four things, then you can make a huge dent in the amount of case presentations on your CV. I saw a few other questions in the chat here. Let's see. What if we have a wide range of specialty interests? How would you recommend doing any of the options you mentioned so we don't seem all over the place? Okay, so that's a great question. If you're in the position where you have a lot of interest, what I would do is I would first break down, do you want a procedural or a non-procedural specialty? Because specialties that are procedural, you can find something that is basically generic for all those specialties. So say, for example, you want to do either surgery or EM or pulmonary crit care, for example. All those specialties put in central lines. So you could find a project on central lines that will apply to all of them. Or you could find something that is, it doesn't have to be about the exact topic. So instead of like going for something that's like pulmonary lung disease that would only apply for pulmonary crit care out of those three, then you could find something that is more broad than that. And so that's kind of my recommendation for that. And I know a lot of people are not sure about what specialty you want, and that's totally okay. But if you can think procedural versus non-procedural, because guess what? Everybody's got hypertension. That's an easy thing. My girlfriend, she's an OBGYN resident right now in New Jersey. And I remember one of her projects was hypertension in pregnancy. And so she was like, well, shoot, you could help me with this project too, because it's talking about hypertension and we'll put it on your CV as well. And that's what we would do. Like we would work together on stuff and we were able to knock out even more. And we didn't start dating till towards the end of medical school, third year, I believe. So some of the projects we'd obviously already done solo, but that's another option is you can work together with friends on projects and you can be able to knock out even more, because if one person's reaching for connections and you both have your own individual set of connections, then you'll have a wider range of people that you can reach out to. So that's a really good question. As for finding which specialty that you want to do, that's something that the earlier you can figure out. Everybody always says wait till third year. Well, guess what? It's still hard in third year because you're probably also going to find that you like everything. Otherwise, you probably would already know what you want to do. And that's like me being completely true with you, because like if you don't know what specialty you want to do early on, it's because you probably like it all. And so third year, you're going to be in third year and you're going to be like, this is amazing. This is awesome. Wait, I never thought about psych. I kind of like psych too, but I really like IM, and you're not going to have a lot more direction. And so breaking down pro and cons lists, finding people who are in those specialties that you're interested in, or finding residents that are going through the same process is, super, super helpful. Next question here. Any ideas how residencies are going to evaluate board scores with USMLE going pass fail? So great question. So step one is pass fail. Step two obviously is not. So step two is absolutely without a doubt mandatory for anybody that's applying for a specialty that's above minimal level of competency, honestly. And so if you're applying for family medicine, you don't necessarily need to have a step two, even though a lot of programs at the university and academic level and above, such as Ivy League programs, they're going to want it still. And so everybody always says like, oh, we'll just get by without taking step two, but you have to have it. Honestly, in this day and age, now that step one's going pass fail, you just really, really need to have it. It's going to make you more competitive. And it's also honestly a very predictable exam. If you prepare for it correctly, which starts with preparing for step one correctly, then you're going to do well on it. The students that don't do well in step two are the students that don't do well in step one and don't prepare during rotations. So it all starts with what you're doing as an M1 and M2. If you wait any longer than that, it's too late at that point, honestly, because think about it like this. If you're not willing to sacrifice for your goals, then your goals might be the sacrifice themselves. And so somebody else out there is putting in the work right now. So you guys should be too. And I mean, you guys are here on a Saturday at, 12:44 in the afternoon. And that means to me that you guys are clearly dedicated to bettering yourselves. Otherwise, you wouldn't be taking 45 minutes to an hour out of your day to listen to me ramble on today. So, and I appreciate everybody that's here. Honestly, I appreciate you guys showing up. I appreciate you guys being involved and engaged in the comments, because it honestly makes it better for me and more fun as well to meet new faces. And I see a couple familiar faces out there as well. So I appreciate you guys that joined as well. Okay. I saw, oh, here's a good question by Emily. Are research experiences prior to medical school weighed in on residency applications, or do they primarily focus on research experiences during medical school? So the answer is you can put anything on your CV when you're applying for residency, but the problem is you don't want to dilute it. So if you put in a bunch of stuff from undergrad, it's going to dilute and look like you don't have as much stuff going on during medical school, which is obviously not ideal. You don't want to be pushing more than 5-6 years at the most back to prior stuff on your CV. And even that should be specialized stuff. So if you're applying for, say, internal medicine and you have a project that is on bee larvae, like that doesn't tell you anything about your level of dedication towards internal medicine. So I would recommend that if it's specific in regards to the medical profession, then that research is going to be stronger and it's going to have heavier weight on your application. In fact, I honestly wouldn't really recommend anything that was not medically related during your undergrad. So that's a really, really good question. And thank you guys so much for all your kind words. It's honestly a pleasure talking with you guys about all this stuff. Next question from Daniel. Is it important to take step one if you want to take step two? The answer is yes. You got to take step one and step two both. And then for everybody else that takes step one and step two later on, then obviously you want to go absolutely as hard as possible still, because it's so difficult to prepare for step two if you're not proficient at step one, honestly, because the amount that my top students study for step two is so minimal compared to step one, because they've already prepared so well for step one that they don't have a lot left to do for step two. And the benefit is now you're in rotations. Who wants to be studying for boards on rotations? Like, you want to be in the hospital, in the wards, in the ICU, doing your thing, making connections, meeting people, getting your foot in the door. You don't want to be wasting time every single evening studying for boards. So the more time you put in now, the easier your classes will be, because you're going to be more prepared. And then the better experience you're going to have during rotations. So a lot of it comes down to what you do today sets you up for success years down the road. And that's not an exaggeration at all. Rachel put a question about saying publishing an article in SGA rounds or the Com Outlook counts as a publication. Realistically, how good of a publication is this? So it's obviously not crazy strong. It's oftentimes those publications are not even medically related, which is okay if it's about wellness or something like that. Like all residency programs, you can be like, oh yeah, that's nice, cool, and then they'll move on. But that's still something that you can put on your CV. So if it comes down to should I do this, yes or no, the answer is going to be yes. But how much weight does it have? Obviously, it's not going to have as much weight as publishing a New England Journal of Medicine or something like that. If it comes down to it, my best advice is to do the research in the case presentations that you're personally interested in, because you're going to be much more passionate talking about it at your interview. And so one of the things that I like to discuss with my students is there's 6 different types of applicants. One of those classifications, I call them the applicant strata. One of them is the researcher. So if you want to be the researcher, which means that that is what your CV is basically fashioned around, then you have to go super hard on research, and you have to pick topics that you're going to be extremely, extremely excited to talk about. Because guess what? Everything on your CV basically is going to be revolving around research. And the biggest turnoff in interviews, because I help with the interview process for every year of new applicants, is people that have stuff on their CV and they brush it off like, I did this, but I don't really care about it, that type of vibe. So you want to pick stuff that you're interested in, because you're going to be able to speak emphatically. And the number one rule when you're in an interview is you want the other person to see stuff from your point of view. And how do people want to see from another person's point of view is if they're excited or if they agree with what you're saying. And so if you have stuff about a small bowel obstruction, for example, on your CV, and you don't care about small bowel obstruction, how are you going to be excited in an interview? The answer is you're not. And so the easiest piece of advice to really make yourself stand out is to pick stuff that you want to do to stand out about. So that kind of is like a big overarching generic advice, but it just makes it easier for you in the long run.